we join them to honor these ancestral grounds that we are gathered upon and to support the resilience and strength of all Indigenous people. So without further ado, I will hand over the microphone to Rob Thompson, and thank you very much for joining us for this evening.
All right, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Is the microphone aligned correctly? Great. All right, well, my name is Rob Thompson. I'm the president of the Victorian Alliance of San Francisco, and like all members of the Victorian Alliance, I'm a volunteer. My day job is that I'm the Federal Preservation Officer for the Presidio Trust here in San Francisco. It's the National Historic Landmark District and former Army base, just a little ways from here. And so I'm a professional preservationist in addition to the volunteer work I do for the Alliance. And thank you very much for being out here tonight to help us launch our 2022 Hybrid House Tour. And thanks again to San Francisco Heritage, Carolyn and Carrie and the team here for hosting us in this spectacular historic home, which I know you are all excited to visit upstairs as soon as I'm done talking and as soon as Carrie's done talking. So we'll get to it. Thank you again. So a bit about the Victorian Alliance of San Francisco for those of you who are not familiar or who might not already be members. The Victorian Alliance was established in 1973. It was established in the Mission District in response to the previous decades of urban renewal, which resulted in the very unfortunate removal and destruction of many Victorian homes, not to mention neighborhoods and livelihoods across the city. And it also coincided with a renewal and appreciation for San Francisco's signature architectural style, the Victorians. Our mission today is to support the restoration and preservation of historic buildings, landscapes, and artifacts through advocacy and education. That's our mission statement. And while our guiding light is Victorian residential architecture, we celebrate all styles of the city's architectural heritage, from Carpenter Gothic to mid-century modern. So a quick show of hands, how many people in the room tonight live in a building that was constructed before 1970? 1970. All right, so we have a group of stakeholders here. That means you live in a building that may be considered architecturally significant and you're a natural ally. You're also here at an event about historic preservation, so easy trick, but consider it consider yourselves a stakeholder in the city's architectural heritage and consider joining the Victorian Alliance and San Francisco Heritage if you haven't already. So we're, as I said, a nonprofit. We're an all-volunteer organization comprised of homeowners, renters, decorative arts enthusiasts, and our fair share of San Francisco eccentrics. We currently have 250 members in our organization, and we meet monthly in historic buildings and homes across the city. Our primary activities right now are grant making, advocacy, and house tours. House tours are what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about our grants program. Our grants program over the years has gifted nearly $500,000 to historic preservation projects all around the city. A few notable projects that we've contributed to over the years are the Palace of Fine Arts, restoration of the ticket booth at the fabulous Castro Theater, restoration of interiors at the old Mint building, restoration of stained glass windows at churches all over the city, including this one here at St. Paul's Church in Noe Valley. And one of my personal favorite projects, the restoration of a WPA mural, or actually, pardon me, it's a fresco, in the building that now functions as the Haight Street Arts Center. And it's a fresco completed by the artist Reuben Kadish. And if you haven't been there to see the fresco in all its splendor, or what they're doing at the Haight Street Arts Center right now in their fabulous collections, I highly recommend a visit to that really fabulous historic building and tremendous cultural facility. So one of our most recent grant recipients is literally over your heads right now. We earlier this year awarded a grant to San Francisco Heritage to help with the restoration of one of their pianos upstairs. So maybe that can be pointed out to you on your tour. So we have a breadth and depth of grant recipients. We really encourage anybody who's advocating for or working on a historic project to consider applying for grants, and you can find more information about this on our website. Beginning in the 1970s, the Alliance has organized 45 house tours in over a dozen neighborhoods across the city. So hundreds of buildings in these tours have collectively been featured, and each has a meticulously researched history. All of these histories are available with our tour programs via the Internet Archive, so I encourage you to go online and browse. Together, all of this represents a tremendous wealth of architectural history for San Francisco, in particular for residential buildings. So check it out, Internet Archive, we have our own page and everything. But due to the pandemic and our ongoing desire to expand our audience and reach more people, we've started to experiment with different formats from our traditional in-person house tours that have constituted all of those 45 events that I mentioned earlier. So we started in 2020 with a virtual house tour that was comprised of a series of professionally produced videos featuring homeowners and tradespeople or people who have a stake in historic buildings around the city. These are still on our website today, and so if you haven't seen them, it really is a great time to go check out some of these videos and see some of the fabulous interiors virtually that we have traditionally offered access to in person. And then this year what we've done is developed a hybrid house tour, what we're calling a hybrid house tour. And it's focusing on not one, but 3 neighborhoods this year. The Western Addition, Pacific Heights, where we are right now, and the Haight-Ashbury. And we selected these 3 neighborhoods because it's where our organization has some of its roots. It's places where our partner organizations, like San Francisco Heritage, are currently active. And we feel that these are neighborhoods that represent our tour's theme of finding a sense of place in San Francisco. So in order to participate in the house tour, we've built a couple of different platforms that you can engage with. One is on your mobile device. We have a website that has active maps that you can navigate and touch on different homes that will bring up images of the homes as well as the full house histories that were published in previous year's programs. So you can lead yourself around these 3 neighborhoods. There's 41 houses in total. Do it at your own pace and have a good time of it. And don't forget to patronize legacy businesses whenever you pass by them. We also have 2 in-person events. You're at one of them right now. The next one is on October 22nd at the San Francisco Public Library. And what we've done for that event is we brought together a panel of interdisciplinary folks who are interested and active in preservation in San Francisco. They're architects, they're advocates, they're city employees, craftspeople, and homeowners who can speak about the practice of preservation and why preservation in San Francisco is so important from their various points of view. So that's taking place October 22nd, Saturday, at the main branch of San Francisco Public Library down in the Civic Center. So it's a free event. I encourage everybody who's here to attend. There's more information about it on our website, and please tell your friends. All right, so also in support of our house tour, we've developed the following 2 short films that support our theme of finding a sense of place in San Francisco.
The Victorians, have this bad press that they're these stodgy old people locked in the past. And what we've really discovered was when this house was built in the Victorian period was an age of innovation and discovery.
I feel that this is one of the more important Victorian homes in San Francisco because of its very rich history, both with the two original owners, the Russian consulate that was here from the 1920s through the 1940s. Its important aspect during the African-American period of the house being used as a rooming house and famous jazz musicians here.
They used the ballroom downstairs for nightly jam sessions, and some very famous people lived here in the time. Hugh Masekela, Art Lewis, and John Handy all lived in the house at times. And they would bring all very famous people over from Fillmore Street Jazz Clubs to play here in the house late at night. That brought in the late 1950s, a group of beatniks that started moving into the rooms because they liked the jazz scene here. By the early 1960s, the beatnik era had evolved into the birth of the Haight-Ashbury and the hippie movement. This home became the first commune in the city for a commune called the Calliope Company, in which Ken Kesey was a member of. It played a key part in the development of the hippie movement in San Francisco and is documented in the book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. We are currently in the grand tower of the home. It was constructed on the house at the time the house was built in 1889 because William Westerfeld wanted to have a grand view of the city, one of the finer views of the city at the time when the house was built, 360-degree view all the way out to the ocean before they built the apartment building off to the side. He could clearly see the ships docking on the docks. So when goods and merchandise was arriving on the docks coming over from Oakland, he could come up here and see if he needed to send a crew down there to unload his merchandise that might be coming in. I feel that this house is an important part of San Francisco history. I've been very blessed to be the caretaker of it, and I hope it will stand for several hundred more years for people to be able to appreciate its past.
Lucky in a lot of ways because in some ways this house was kind of like a time capsule of 1910. You know, the stained glass, the built-in, the murals, everything was still here, which we were really excited about. It's a Craftsman Edwardian. You see mostly the Craftsman influence in this room mostly, kind of nowhere else in the house. It was built by a Danish carpenter for himself and his own family, but what I think is really special about it and what you just don't see elsewhere in the Sunset District and really in other modest houses in San Francisco is that there's two murals in this house. It shows you how, you know, a family, an immigrant family of modest means was able to create something beautiful, you know, even though they maybe didn't have a lot. So this room in particular, it's got a mural of Spanish colonial San Francisco. So there's Mission Dolores, and behind Mission Dolores is Twin Peaks. There's a Spanish priest. There's chickens and drunks and miners, and it's just neat because you're kind of transported into this other nostalgic era. And then when you flip over to the other side of the room, what you see is a Spanish galleon, people unloading things onto docks. You see seagulls, and I think it's really charming that it's still here.
The houses in San Francisco, when they were built, were still dependent on gas lighting. You had electricity from day one, but it wasn't on for very long during the day and was notoriously not very reliable. So it was very common to have a light at the base of the stairs, on top of the newel post, and of course, everything had to be decorative. So very elaborate sculptural bronze lamps were made. These days, we spend a lot of time turning them into electric fixtures instead of gas, which they very often originally were.
Plaster is a building material which is based on the element of gypsum. Gypsum is mined from the earth, and then companies take that gypsum and add different elements of lime and different additives so that it becomes a powdered substance that when it's mixed with water, it can be used in different forms. It can be used to do wall surfaces, or it can also be used to pour into molds, which is what I do. And what really the Victorians delighted in was creating these wonderful organic shapes that would drip and drape off of the ceilings and the walls. And so that is where flexible molds came in handy, because it just saved having to carve all of those things out of wood. Those things could then be mass produced out of plaster at a much more reasonable price.
This is the shower scene from Psycho. Yeah. What was here before, when we moved in 1990, was a modern shower, and this was all redwood on the ceiling, and it was just a 1970s modern bathroom. And I really wanted to have a Victorian 19th century bathroom, even though this was a 1907 house. And we installed this shower, and it is absolutely my favorite thing in the house.
Last I knew, there was something around 5,000 remaining Victorians in the city of San Francisco. Every last one of them in need of its 100-year tune-up. Many years of deferred maintenance, many years of economic boom and bust cycles that did not allow people to maintain them properly. And within those houses, you have every discipline imaginable in the decorative arts. Decorative painters, ornamental plaster, stained glass, carpentry, wood carving, turning, it's all there. San Francisco is fairly unique in its ability to support artisans across a very consistent time frame. It means that artisans who are skilled within that set of decorative arts have lots of work still to do here.
I think old homes are important. They're a piece of our history. This home is a piece of San Francisco's history, and people have been enjoying looking at these homes from the park. And in fact, looking at almost every San Francisco home has a really rich history, beautiful finishes, and I think it's important to sort of keep the city looking beautiful and in this very, quintessential San Francisco way.
I believe the Victorian architecture of San Francisco is very important to be preserved. It represents the end of the craftsman era, when people actually handmade everything and took pride in their work. The buildings were built out of old growth redwood. You're never gonna be able to get trees that are that old again to build such sturdy buildings. And they represent a time capsule of history that, it's important to see. There was good and bad in the Victorian era, but it's important to document all of it. And these houses stand testament to that era, which was an age of excess, but yet it existed, and these homes are a true testament to that era.
The desire to build more housing in San Francisco is huge. Demand and prices are high. But the desire to preserve our Victorian buildings from demolition runs deep. They connect us to our culture and history, so beautiful. To tear down the old and build the new? Or to preserve the old and limit growth? It's a clash. Unless people compromise. The Englander House on Franklin Street was built in 1880, but in recent years it fell into disrepair. The land could be used to build new housing units. The house itself could be used for multiple units. So architects revived a San Francisco tradition not done for 45 years. So that's the Englander Compromise in San Francisco. The exterior of a classic Victorian house will be preserved, and building projects at 2 locations will add 65 housing units to our city.
Talk a little bit about some of the houses that you'll see if you take our tours, which I encourage you to do, and share a little bit of the history about the houses that I'm going to feature. But first, just to acknowledge again, back to the videos, those were produced by One World Productions, which is a San Francisco filmmaking enterprise. It's run by one of our board members, Fiona McDougall, who wasn't able to be here tonight, but I really want to thank her for doing such a fabulous job with those videos. And a lot of the footage that you saw in the first video is taken from our 2020 tour, and some of the speakers in that video are featured on the virtual house tour. And so if you liked some of what you saw about some of those interiors and the histories of some of those houses, you can go online to our website and watch the full videos there. All right, so like I said, I'm going to go through a top 5 list of houses that are featured on this year's hybrid house tour. They were assembled by a very scientific process and a committee of 1. So if you don't like what you see, you can talk to me afterwards. Each slide that I'm going to show you is accompanied by a hand-drawn sketch of the houses, and this is a tradition that the Alliance has supported for decades now. Where one of our members, the very talented Kit Haskell, hand draws each house and then presents the original art to the property owners as a thank you for taking place in, or for participating in our tour. So those are the images that you'll see. So I'm going to start here with number 5, 1315 Waller Street, the John A. Whelan House. This is in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood. 1896. You actually saw it very briefly in the first video. This is one of the 4 Seasons houses. I believe this one's winter, if I'm not mistaken. And it was built by a shipwright, of course, John Whelan, who developed it along with the 3 other 4 Seasons houses. He lived in this particular one with his family until 1906. And this was featured on our 2011 house tour. Number 4. We have the Henry Olaf House. This is in the Western Addition. It's just a block or 2 uphill from Alamo Square. And it was designed by San Francisco city architect Charles Havens for a Scottish immigrant named James Scobie, who had amassed a modest fortune as a stone masonry contractor and in railroad investments. Very classic San Francisco fortune, right, of the 19th century. It's built on a corner lot. It's a Queen Anne style building, and it's currently in use as an addiction recovery center. So I included it here just to illustrate, the adaptability and the long lives that Victorian homes often have, even when they transition from residential to other purposes. And we featured this beauty on the 2015 house tour. You've probably driven by it 100 times as you're flying down Fell Street, trying to get to Golden Gate Park or something. It's on your right. Slow down next time, it's a beauty. Number 3, we have the Frederick and Anita Weiland House, not too far from where we are right now, here in the Pacific Heights neighborhood, built 1882 on California Street. And this was designed by the architecture firm Knitzer and Raun for a wholesale merchant, much like this house, Frederick Weiland and his wife Anita. It's a high Italian style home, and it was subject to one of my favorite types of projects associated with Victorians, which is a facade restoration. This had been altered with some shingles. A lot of the ornament had been taken off, but the owners decided to restore the facade and bring it back to its Italian glory. If you know anybody who's ever contemplating doing that, please encourage them to do so. It's expensive, but worth it, and truly a gift to the street to do. This building was featured in our 1997 house tour. All right, number 2. This is the Nolan House, 1071 Page Street. Page Street, one of my favorite streets in the entire city, in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, 1889. So this was designed by architect William Dennis Shea for a photographer and a property investor, a female Irish immigrant named Margaret, or Maggie, to her friends, Nolan. Shea himself was a prolific designer of churches. You probably know his work in the form of the Star of the Sea Church, St. Vincent de Paul, St. Anne's out in Sunset. And this modest but really elegant Queen Anne building was featured on our 2014 house tour. So I'm giving you really just a snapshot of each of the house histories that accompany these buildings. They're much longer with a great deal of detail about who lived in the houses, what kind of work they did. There's even a story, I think, associated with this house about a surgeon who lived there who was famous in World War I for having performed his own appendectomy. So, if you like nuggets of wisdom that, hey, it's October. Native Mansions coming. If you like nuggets of San Francisco and personal history like that, these tours are full of information like that. And ringing in at number 1, how could I resist? And this building needs no introduction because you're in it right now. Haas-Lilienthal House, Pacific Heights, 1886. Not only home to this fabulous organization that has been so generous in partnering with us tonight, but also generous enough to host you on a tour of the beautiful spaces upstairs. So please avail yourselves of that after the presentation. And when you're done, please go ahead and check out our website. Take some time over the next couple of weeks to take the tour. San Francisco summer is coming. These are the best weather months coming up, so get out there on the streets, walk around, check out the 41 buildings. And please, if you're interested, consider joining the Victorian Alliance. And thanks a lot for your time and attention tonight. I'm going to turn things over to Carrie, who is going to talk about some of San Francisco Heritage's programming, which we're also very excited to support as well. Carrie.
My name is Carrie Young. I'm the Communications and Programs Manager here at San Francisco Heritage. And my colleague Pam and I are just going to really briefly kind of go over some of Heritage's work in the 3 neighborhoods that the Victorian Alliance is focusing on this year. We have a lot of history, past and present, in those neighborhoods, so I just wanted to do a quick overview of our work there. And so, as many of you know, and what the video said about the Englander House, that was not the first time that has been done. The big house movement has been undertaken. The Western Addition really was a place where our advocacy work as a very new organization really began. And the possibility of saving Victorian houses in this neighborhood really inspired the formation of our organization in 1971. And really our new organization stepped in to rescue and restore 12 structures as part of really what still is maybe the largest building moving project in San Francisco history. And like the formation of the Victorian Alliance, really in many ways the growing preservation movement around the country around this time was a direct response to redevelopment, really bulldozing entire neighborhoods in the name of clearing urban blight. So in late 1971, SF Heritage and the Landmarks Board identified the best buildings left in the redevelopment agency's A2 project area in the Western Addition and began negotiating with redevelopment to save these buildings. And so the agency agreed to set aside 19 Victorian residences, offering them up for sale for nominal sums. Unfortunately though, 13 of these buildings had to be moved, which really reduced the potential pool of buyers. Only 2 sold, and also one was inadvertently demolished. And so time is really running out, so SF Heritage's co-founder Charles Page and board member Jane Offals entered minimum bids on the remaining houses, like the minimum that they could bid, they entered those bids, and they started looking for buyers for the remaining houses and also new sites for where they could be relocated. And thankfully these efforts were given a boost by the redevelopment agency, which gave $150,000 for moving expenses for these homes. This was an elaborate Victorian that until 1974 stood at 773 Turk Street. And it was designed by the Newsom brothers. It's a 2-story Eastlake house. And it was eventually moved to 1735 Webster Street. But when they did so, they found out that it really didn't quite fit into its layout.
Oh no.
And it's great hearing stories from Heritage founders and early members that were there that night, just talking about how they were kind of having to saw off a little bit off of the sides. But really, a moving crew really ingeniously used 2x4s to essentially fit it into its lot, and eventually got it in there. But they did these moves in the dead of night, and so they moved very slowly. Had to remove a lot of wires on the way there. Many of you may have seen the Englander House move, and I was there for that move, and they had to essentially take down a street pole because it couldn't turn all the way. So a lot of that was happening. So really, after its dramatic move and restoration, this house, which is known as the Bulmer House, was recognized by the San Francisco Landmarks Board as one of the 6 most important Victorian structures in the city. And for many years, it was also SF Heritage's logo and on our letterhead as well. And so aside from the Bulmer House that was moved to Webster Street, and another 2 houses that were moved to the 1000 block of Broderick Street, most of the buildings that SF Heritage moved during this time were moved to what was christened the Bideman Place Historic District between Eddy, DeVisadero, Scott, and O'Farrell Streets. So these are 2 of them on their way home, on their way to their new homes. And this is a look at one of those 2 homes at its new address on 33 Bideman Street in 1977, and that's the house today, which you can still see. And so if you're curious about where all of these houses that we moved ended up, we actually created this handy map that's available on our website, and I think it would be fun to just go out and try to find where these houses are, just with the new knowledge, knowing that they were moved from somewhere else. And so yeah, please go to our website and to access this map. And finally, in 2021, last year, it was SF Heritage's 50th anniversary. So as part of that, we produced finished a multi-part documentary on our history, and it includes really awesome oral histories from our early members and early supporters who were there in those early days of saving Victorians, and a lot of great footage, just sharing their memories of what it was like, and really encourage you to go on our YouTube channel and watch that as well. So now I want to hand it over to my colleague Pam, who's going to talk about our work in Pacific Heights.
All right, so of course San Francisco Heritage main kind of presence in the Pacific Heights neighborhood is of course the Haas-Lilienthal House. It remains an ongoing symbol of San Francisco Heritage dedication to the responsible stewardship of historic buildings. Over 50 years in San Francisco Heritage's care, the house has hosted weddings, teas, concerts, lectures, dances, and conferences, and has served as the headquarters for dozens of volunteers and employees to further San Francisco Heritage's mission of preservation. While rescuing dilapidated Victorian buildings in the Western Addition in 1973, San Francisco Heritage was entrusted with the care of this magnificent property. Designed by architect Peter Schmidt, this house at 2007 Franklin Street was built in 1886 for the German immigrant William Haas. William made his wealth in the wholesale grocery business. He had an older cousin who began the Haas Brothers business, and William joined in that business. Over the years, he became a prominent member of San Francisco Society, serving as president of Mount Zion Hospital, and he was on the board of directors for the Wells Fargo Bank. William and his wife Bertha, they raised their 3 children here at the house. The house has survived the 1906 earthquake and the firestorm that followed. The flames were extinguished just a block away on Van Ness Avenue. 3 generations of the Haas family and extended relatives lived at the property for over 8 decades. The last family member was Alice Haas-Lilienthal. She was the youngest child of William and Bertha Haas, and she was the wife of prominent businessman Samuel Lilienthal. That's them right there. Alice and Sam moved into this house in 1916 after the death of her father, William. Sam and Alice raised their 3 children in this house. They also parented their niece, Madeline, and their nephew, Billy, after their parents had passed away, Alice's brothers, Charles, and his wife, Fanny. Alice died in 1972, and the following year, her heirs were contacted by Charles Hall Page. He was the first director of San Francisco Heritage, and at the time, he wanted to know what the plans were for this unoccupied house. San Francisco Heritage at that time was needed of a home as its work grew, and Page was ready to hire permanent staff. In response, Alice and Samuel's children agreed to entrust stewardship of this house to San Francisco Heritage, including its artwork and original furniture. San Francisco Heritage had a ready-made house museum to serve as a core of its educational programming. To attract supporters, San Francisco Heritage has looked beyond the Haas-Lilienthal House as just a house museum, but also as an event venue to bring in generations of people who would not normally visit for a tour. One of the most popular events held at the house is our Halloween event, Mayhem Mansion, which is celebrating its 10th year. It was started by San Francisco Heritage staff member Heather Kraft and has developed into an in-demand event that has introduced hundreds, if not thousands, of people to the Haas-Lilienthal House and to San Francisco Heritage. Our holiday events, including our holiday open house and our holiday teas, these two illustrate the importance of San Francisco Heritage to seek out new ways to present our preservation mission and to keep the Haas-Lilienthal House relevant in other people's lives. But at its core, the Haas-Lilienthal House is a house museum, and if I may say so, a pretty great one at that. Thousands of people, both local and international, have sought out this house to see a true San Francisco Victorian. It is a unique space for visitors to experience an unrenovated Queen Anne-style home. From the layout to the woodworking and wall coverings, the Haas-Lilienthal House gives a glimpse into how a Victorian family lived out their lives. A major part of the appeal of the Haas-Lilienthal House to visitors on the tour, besides the structure itself, is the furniture that belonged to the Haas and Lilienthal families. The restoration and repair of furniture is always an expensive proposition, and is with great gratitude for the generosity of grants offered by the Victorian Alliance to assist with furniture projects here at the house. In 2016, the Victorian Alliance grant resulted in the restoration and reupholstering of the sofas in the first and second parlor. And more recently this year, San Francisco Heritage was awarded another Victorian Alliance grant to refinish the piano in the front parlor. You'll be seeing those pieces on your tour today. The process of refinishing the piano will be documented and shared on our social media platforms. I think supporters of both our organizations would be interested in seeing how these pieces are brought back to life. Another major piece in San Francisco Heritage impact in Pacific Heights neighborhood and the larger community is on our Heritage Hikes program. First introduced in 1982, the Heritage Hike program is geared towards San Francisco school students studying local history. We are excited to report the restart of this program for this school year after a long hiatus during the pandemic. The Heritage Hike program has introduced local architecture and life in the Gilded Age to thousands of San Francisco students. The program includes a tour of the house and a teacher-led hike around the neighborhood. Children are encouraged to explore the built environment and see details they may have passed over before. The house tour explores ways on how children in the 19th century are different and the same from children in the 21st century. One of the most rewarding aspects of this program is the return of the students to share what they learned with their families. We've also had them return as adults and ask if we still run the program today. It's often hard to judge what impact you have when students leave the house, but these moments capture how the tour and what they learned can resonate for some. San Francisco Heritage's walking tour of Pacific Heights neighborhood have played an important role in informing San Franciscans about their architectural traditions and surroundings. Started in 1973 by San Francisco Heritage staff member Randolph Delahanty, docent-led walking tours have remained a mainstay of San Francisco Heritage public education offerings. The walking tours not only showcase a variety of historical house styles, but they also demonstrate changes in the neighborhood and why preservation is important not only in Pacific Heights, but throughout San Francisco. More recently, the walking tours have included information pulled from census records to give insight into people who have worked in these houses and to provide a more expansive history of the neighborhood. The diversity of San Francisco citizens is reflected in the history of these amazing historical houses, and it allows walkers to see themselves in these houses and to make them more relatable by going beyond the architects and the owners. Of course, the success of San Francisco Heritage, like Victorian Alliance, educational programs have always relied on dedicated volunteers, some of whom are here tonight. Since the beginning, volunteers have been instrumental in staffing events, lectures, leading walking and house tours. We're always looking for new volunteers to help us with our mission, and I hope when you finish your tour tonight, you might be inspired to donate some of your time and energy to volunteering with our programs today. Thank you.
All your answers here. Oh, and Pam forgot to mention that she runs our Haas-Lilienthal House Instagram, which is great. And she's posting about just like little pieces of not only furniture in the house, but as they really relate to Victorian history in San Francisco. So definitely follow us on Instagram. And so finally, I just wanted to talk about the Haight-Ashbury. And so SF Heritage's work in the Haight is focused on the Doolin-Larson building right at the corner of 8th and Ashbury Streets on the northwest corner. It's seen here in 1967. The year the Summer of Love, of course, brought over 100,000 new people to San Francisco. See some of the original businesses in this photo, including Nasitica, which was run by Peggy Caserta, who was a young business owner in her own right, one of the first mod hip clothing shops in the Haight. And she also invented bell-bottom jeans, so a real pioneer. So originally constructed in 1903, the Doolin-Larson building was raised after the 1906 earthquake and fire to add storefronts to the ground floor and to the rear yard as well. And this colonial revival building today includes 6 commercial retail spaces fronting Haight Street, and the upper floors contain the original residence of the original owner, Richard P. Doolin. And so the building is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. It's a San Francisco landmark, number 253, and it was also named by the National Trust of Historic Places as their 100th national treasure. And so longtime owner and resident, Norman Larson, donated this property to San Francisco Heritage upon his death in 2018. And so today, we are using the building as a center for our Growing Artists in Residence program, which invites artists, activists, and academics to take inspiration from our mission, as well as the history of the counterculture movements so integral to this neighborhood, of course. So when Victorian Alliance really talks about celebrating a sense of place here in San Francisco, this residency, I think, really speaks to that with these artists living and working in this historic house on this really special corner that has seen so much history. And these are just a few of our artists in residence for this year, including our current artist in residence, SF Poet Laureate Tongo Isaac. And also, so a vacancy during the pandemic in one of the storefronts of the building really gave us an opportunity to run exciting programming with artisan community partners. And so right now, actually, this is the storefront's address is 1506 Haight on the ground floor of the Doolin Larson building. And right now you can check out a pop-up partnership, with the Missions Cultural Center for Latino Arts, who will be in there for the rest of the month. And it's really awesome. We're helping to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month with them. They're doing screen printing, they have original prints for sale, selling local handmade goods, etc. So please stop by the storefront when you're next in the Haight. And in August 2022, we launched Heritage in the Neighborhoods, Haight-Ashbury, which is the latest in our ongoing program where we're going out to neighborhoods in San Francisco and really spotlighting what's special about those neighborhoods, their special historic resources that are worthy of recognition, and really gathering a community together to work on a preservation project in that neighborhood. And so for Haight-Ashbury Month, since we had this awesome storefront on the ground floor of the Doolin Larson building, we hired 2 local artists to decorate the windows. That's B. Betwy and Christine Innes, who created really, really great window art celebrating legacy businesses in the Haight-Ashbury and the people behind them. And also part of the month, we wrote a lot of posts on the Haight's lesser-known early commercial corridor and its development of its early businesses, starting from the Haight's really growth in the late 1890s. So please visit our website to check those out. This is just one of my favorite images of a business along Haight and what it looks like today. You can see a little bit of the resemblance. And Pam also created a special Haight-Ashbury walking tour based on one that SF Heritage created back in the 1980s. But the special thing that Pam really added to this tour was that it includes not only prominent Victorian buildings in the neighborhood, but also information about some of the original residents in these buildings based on available census records. So it really brings a richness to the walking tour as you're taking it. So this is also, that tour is also available on our website. And these are just a few of the very varied and colorful buildings available on that. And that's a self-guided walking tour. You can just print out or access from your phone. And quickly, so a big part of Heritage in the Neighborhoods, like I mentioned, is working with the community on a preservation project, really to build momentum for historic preservation in that neighborhood. So hopefully, more projects will be undertaken in the future. And so in the Haight, we hosted a public voting contest to choose which eligible business in the Haight-Ashbury should be added next to San Francisco's Legacy Business Registry. And the registry really recognizes businesses that our heritage really inspired the creation of with our work back in 2013. And so after 1,100 votes, over 1,100 votes, Art Shop Mendel's was the winner. If you guys haven't been to Mendel's, it's a really awesome arts and crafts store right on Haight Street. Any arts and crafts item you need, Mendel's will have. And this is the owner, Naomi, here, standing in front of the shop, and so we are working with her right now on their legacy business application. And finally, we wanted to mention longtime live music venue Club Deluxe, which many of you may have Red announced that they were closing permanently, and that was right at the beginning of our Spotlight Month of spotlighting legacy businesses in the Haight-Ashbury. And so Club Deluxe is part of our voting contest, and they announced right at the beginning of the month that they were going to close permanently. So we made the decision to withdraw them from the contest in order to work with them, especially on their legacy business application in the midst of their lease negotiations with their landlords. So in the hope that it will raise awareness and build, just bring a lot of attention to their plight in the hopes that they would not close. And we were, in fact, notified by Supervisor Dean Preston's office that the work on their legacy business application did in fact play into their lease negotiations, and they decided not to close. So it was a great. So the music will play on, and please visit them. They're closed right now for a restoration, much needed restoration, but they will open again soon. And so this, I'll just leave you with how much this reminds us of how vulnerable small businesses really still are during the pandemic. It's not over yet, and how important it is for us in our mission at San Francisco Heritage to just continue uplifting these businesses, supporting legacy businesses as, really special pieces of our city. Just want to say thank you again on behalf of San Francisco Heritage. We are also a member-based organization, so we encourage you to join us, follow us on social media, come to Mansion later in this month, our spooky haunted house, and thank you.